All right, so let me just go ahead and start and ask if there are any announcements. 1 minute each, please. Does anyone want to make any announcements? You can use the little icons at the bottom. Okay, I see Dr. Tim. Go ahead, Dr. Tim, 1 minute, please. You're on mute.
Of course, thank you. Just a short announcement. I'm running for Congress in the 50th for June 7th primary. I have a new website, Vote Dr. Tim, VOTEDRTIM.com. Would appreciate some look over from your club and members, and I thank you for being here.
Thank you, Dr. Tim. All right, I thought we had someone who wanted to announce the Women's March. Is there someone here? If not, I can attempt to do it. Okay, well, unfortunately, I don't have the link with me, so I'll just mention it. I'll just mention that there is a Women's March in multiple cities, including San Diego. And if you're interested in joining, I think it's 10 to 12 on Saturday, October 2nd. If you're interested in participating, please just email me and I'll put my email on the chat and I will find the link for you, or I'll just find the link now if I get a chance and put it on the chat so that you can sign up. All right, so I think we're going to have a lot of discussion on the back end, so I want to save as much time as we can. So why don't I let Clark take over here, and Clark, if you're ready, go ahead and start the show.
Hi, everybody. This is Clark Lenday. I'm Deputy Political Director at Patriotic Millionaires, and I'm going to be sharing my screen to show you all our Tax the Rich show. We got Morris here, too, to answer questions at the end. Hey, Morris, how you doing? And if there's any technical difficulty, just let me know, because I want to get it right. I think I'm currently looking, Maz, at your screen, though, so I'm going to need to take over that.
Do I need to stop? Okay, let me stop. And you should have sharing privilege. Let me know if you don't. Oh, stop. There we go. Now try that.
All right, thank you. And then I'm going to share computer sound. Okay. Let me know if the sound's okay.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to Tax the Rich, Save America. Let's dive in. Inequality, the root cause of social unrest, is higher today than it has been in 100 years, and it's getting worse.
During the pandemic, 600,000 people died and millions lost their jobs. Billionaires in America made $1.8 trillion.
Now Congress is deciding who's going to pay to rebuild our country. There are three choices. Millionaires, billionaires, and multinational corporations will pay for it. You will pay for it, or it won't get done. 71% of Americans believe the economy is rigged against them. Guess what? They're right. So Morris, how do you rig an economy?
It's easy, Erica. You start with the tax code. In 2017, with full control of the federal government, Republicans in Washington rewrote the entire federal tax code. In 2018, for the first time in American history, billionaires paid a lower effective tax rate than any other group of people in the country.
So let's see how that happens by comparing a regular person's taxes with a rich person's taxes. Let's get started.
Say that two people, we'll call them Joe and Cammie Workhart, both worked full-time last year, putting in 40 hours every week. Together, they made $100,000, just above average for a two-earner household. They're married, they'll file their taxes jointly. So after taking the standard deduction and paying into Social Security and Medicare, they end up with $75,200 in taxable income.
Now let's step back and explain a couple of things. Here's a chart of the federal tax bracket showing how much you pay at each level of income. Everybody gets a standard deduction, and you only pay taxes if you make above that amount. We have a progressive federal income tax system, meaning that you pay a slightly higher percentage of your income in taxes the more money that you make. So after the standard deduction, a married couple filing jointly will pay 10% on the first chunk of their taxable income and 12% on the bit after that, and so on and so forth until they max out at a 37% rate for any income over $622,000. Everybody pays the same rate as they move through the tax brackets, and everyone maxes out at 37%, whether they make $622,000 a year or $622 million.
So back to the work cards. With $75,200 of taxable income after the standard deduction, the work cards will pay 10% of the first chunk and 12% of the rest for a total federal tax bill of around $8,600.
Now, say two other people, we'll call them Ronald and Melanie Slump. They sit around all year long tanning on a beach. One day, Ronald clicks a button on the couple's E-Trade account and sells some stock, making a profit of $100,000. The Slumps would take the standard deduction and be left with $75,200 of taxable income, just like the work cards. They made the same amount of money, so the Slump should pay around the same amount of taxes as the work cards, right, Morris?
Wrong. Under our current tax system, the slumps will pay zero in taxes on that income. The work cards worked hard all year trying to get ahead, while the slumps, who are already rich, sat on the beach drinking strawberry daiquiris. At the end of the year, the work cards are almost $9,000 poorer than the slumps. So how does this happen?
I'll tell you how. Republican lawmakers who wrote the new federal tax code believe money should be taxed differently depending on how you make it. Here's a comparison with the rate side by side. Like the work cards, most people make ordinary income. You work, you make money from that work, you get a paycheck, and taxes come out of that paycheck. Other people, and this is mostly millionaires, make capital gains income. You buy an asset like a stock, it goes up. You sell it for a profit. The profit is considered a capital gain. Capital gains income is taxed at a much lower rate than ordinary income. So if you work for a living, you actually end up paying a higher tax rate on your income than people who live off investments. But that's not the best deal in the new Republican tax code. The best deal is to inherit money like Donald Trump did.
Let's say the work cards got new jobs singing full-time for America Sings. They're such good singers that last year America Sings paid them $11 million. They paid Social Security and Medicare, took the standard deduction. They ended up with just under $11 million of taxable income. They pay 10% of the first chunk, 12% of the next chunk, and so on, maxing out at 37% for all the income over $622,000. Work Hard's total tax bill for the year, around $4 million. Making $11 million a year is hardly a reason to sing Cry Me a River, but how does the Work Hard's tax bill compare to the Slumps?
Well, the Slumps also had a very good year. Mr. Slump's great aunt died and left her entire $11 million estate to the Slumps. Don't worry, they weren't close. So how much will the Slumps pay in taxes on their $11 million of inheritance income?
Nothing, zero, nada. When Republican lawmakers rewrote the federal tax code, they exempted the first $11 million of every estate from taxes, over $22 million for a couple. Once again, the work cards and the slumps took in exactly the same amount of money pre-tax. Because they earned their money in different ways, one couple by working, another by waiting for someone to die, the slumps ended the year $4 million richer than the work cards.
Okay, so we've talked about income. Now let's talk about wealth. Wealth is the total value of all of the assets a person owns.
Half of all Americans have no wealth at all. But for the ones who do, they may have some money in a retirement account or a stock market account, but the majority of their wealth is their primary residence, their homes. That is not true for most rich people.
While rich people may own several homes, most of them keep their wealth in all kinds of other assets, things like stock, art, jewelry, yachts, and 14 feet long preserved sharks. Yes, that's a thing. And yes, a billionaire paid $8 million for it. So how are different kinds of wealth treated in the tax code, Morris?
Back to the work cards and the slumps. The work hard's wealth is basically their home, a lovely little house in Dayton, Ohio, with an assessed value of $250,000. Homeowners pay around 1.68% in property taxes in Dayton. So for the work hards, the tax on their wealth, their home was around $4,000 per year. They will pay that property tax every single year. The slumps also keep part of their wealth in a lovely little house in Dayton, Ohio, with an assessed value of $250,000. They use it to store their furs in the summer. Like the work hards, they too will pay property tax on that part of their wealth for a total of $4,000 per year.
Now, the Slumps used to own more houses, but Mrs. Slump really does not like taxes. So several years ago, they sold all of their houses except for the one in Dayton. Mrs. Slump was worried her furs would be traumatized by a move. They made $500 million on the sale of all of their other houses. And with that $500 million, the Slumps bought a small yacht, a large plane, 3 Picasso paintings, one from his blue period, a pink diamond, 2 prize racehorses, and 1 decorative flower pot filled with antique gold coins. Morris, what was the total tax bill on that part of their wealth?
Zero, nada, nothing. The work hards have wealth of $250,000. The slumps have wealth of $500,250,000. But the annual tax on their respective wealths is exactly the same.
You may have thought we broke from England and started our own country because we wanted things here to be different. But take a deep dive into our tax code and you'll hear God Save the Queen playing in the background.
That's right, Erica. The Republican lawmakers who wrote the new federal tax code clearly prefer a permanent aristocracy. You want proof? Remember how capital gains taxes work? You buy stock for 1 million, you sell it for 10 million, you only pay tax on that 9 million you gained. And you only pay those taxes if and when you sell the stock. Simple enough. What if you bought that stock for 1 million? It grew to be worth 10 million, but you never sold it. Then you died, and at your death, the stock went to your heirs. In the new Republican federal tax code, when your heirs inherit that stock, poof, the cost basis magically changes. Instead of the basis being 1 million, what you paid for the stock when you first bought it, the basis stepped up to 10 million, the value it had on the day that you died. When your heirs sell the stock, they only pay tax on the gains above the new $10 million value. $9 million of capital gains, totally wiped out for tax purposes.
Another gimmick, called the 1031 exchange, allows investors to avoid capital gains taxes when they sell a piece of property if they immediately invest it in another piece of property. Let's say a builder buys a building worth $10 million, holds it for a few years, and then sells it for $60 million and buys 1,000 buildings with that $60 million. He's $50 million richer, but still has paid no taxes. If he dies, his estate will pay some estate taxes, but his heirs will inherit all of that $60 million property at the new basis. That's how millionaire real estate families acquire billions of dollars worth of property without ever paying taxes.
Let's think about that for a minute. On one side is a wealthy heir who never worked, who inherited millions of dollars and contributed nothing to the country.
On the other side are people like the work hards who go to work, pay their taxes, and do their part for the country every single day.
Between 1/3 and 1/2 of all the wealth in America is inherited. And there's nothing wrong with inheriting money, of course, but there's no reason at all that inheritance income should act differently than other kinds of income.
All right, so we've talked about people. Now let's turn to corporations. In 2020, if you bought a single pair of Nike socks, you paid more for those socks than Nike paid in federal taxes for the entire year.
If you sent a single package through FedEx last year, you paid more for your delivery than FedEx paid in federal taxes for all of 2020.
Morris, how does this happen?
There are a lot of ways, but one of the main ones is the new federal tax code allows companies to pretend they do business somewhere other than where they actually do business. Let's take a company like Starbucks, for example. Let's say Starbucks has thousands of stores in the United States and a few dozen in Ireland. You'd expect them to pay a lot of tax in the US and much less tax in Ireland. That would make sense. That is not the way it works. Most large companies have what's called intellectual property, a trademark or a patent, for example. Unlike land and buildings, intellectual property can be transferred to another country as fast as you can click send on an email. Picture that Starbucks logo. A smart lawyer can transfer ownership of that logo to Starbucks of Ireland, who would then legally own that logo. In order to use the logo, Starbucks of the US would have to send royalty payments to the Starbucks of Ireland. The company can make the royalty payments whatever they want. If they make the payments big enough, the company will show all of its profits in Ireland, where tax rates are much lower, even though they sold hugely more coffee in the United States. Using this and other tricks, 55 large US companies paid zero federal tax in 2020. Zero. So here we are again, with the workhards holding up their end of the bargain and everyone else shirking their responsibility.
Now, rich people and CEOs love pretending there are really good reasons why they should pay lower taxes than everyone else. Their favorite reason is that they are job creators. Woo, like they're magicians who create jobs out of thin air just by waving a little wand.
In 2017, there were a lot of CEOs who insisted they would hire more people if Republicans cut the corporate tax rate. They even launched a big job creators bus tour that went all over the country. The CEO of AT&T, Randall Stephenson, is one of the biggest cheerleaders for the corporate tax cut. He insisted the correlation between tax cuts and job creation was very, very tight. Now, keep in mind, corporations only pay tax on their profits. Profits are calculated after expenses like payroll are deducted. So Mr. Stevenson's claim doesn't even make sense on its face. But be that as it may, maybe he was just confused. Maybe he thought he would hire more people if the corporate tax rate was lower.
Morris, I just don't think so. You see, from 2008 to 2015, AT&T paid an effective corporate tax rate of 8%, well below the statutory rate at the time of 35%. During that period, the company cut 80,000 jobs. And since the new Republican tax code went into effect, AT&T has cut an additional 40,000 jobs. And in his last year as CEO, AT&T paid Randall Stephenson $32 million.
Investors like me pay half the tax rate of people who actually work for a living. Lawmakers justify that lower tax rate by saying that investors are job creators and insisting that if we raise their taxes, they won't invest. That just is not true. Let me explain. Apple employs thousands of people to make iPhones and computers. I am an investor in Apple. I have hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of Apple stock. But none of the money I spent buying Apple stock even went to the company. It went to other investors who were selling their stock that day. People who work at Apple have jobs because of the millions of customers who want to buy iPhones, not because of investors like me. Consumer demand is the only real job creator. And to be clear, investors are not going anywhere regardless of the tax rate. The alternative to investing is sticking your money in a mattress. Last I checked, mattresses do not provide very high returns.
Regular people pay twice the tax rate that Morris pays. So even if you had the same income that he did, you would end up every single year worse off. But there is good news. We can fix all of this with your help. Right now, Democrats in Washington are deciding who is going to pay for critical investments in our country. Rural broadband and free community college, so every American has the education they need to achieve the American dream. Childcare and elder care, so hardworking Americans can get back to work. This is urgent. These investments must be made. And millionaires, billionaires, and multinational corporations must be the ones to pay for it, not regular hardworking people. Please call your congressperson today at 202-224-3121. Again, it's 202-224-3121, and demand that all new investments be paid for by millionaires, billionaires, and multinational corporations. And if you want to know more or join the fight to tax the rich and save this beautiful country of ours, please visit taxtherich.com. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for an amazing presentation. That was awesome. Let me give a quick introduction for Morris here. We're really honored to have you here, Morris. Welcome. Mr. Morris Pearl currently serves as chair of the Patriotic Millionaires. He was a managing director at BlackRock, one of the largest investment firms in the world. His work included the maiden lane transactions and assessing government's potential losses from bank bailouts in the US and in Europe. Prior to BlackRock, Mr. Pearl had a long tenure on Wall Street where he invented some of the securitization technology connecting America's capital markets to consumers in need of credit. He is a CFA charter holder, a member of the CFA Institute, the New York Society of Securities Analysts, and on the board of Verified Voting and the Center for Political Accountability. Morris, it's great to have you here, and I'll open it up to Q&A. Actually, I'll let you say a word or two if you like before we open it to Q&A.
Sure. We'll have to edit that introduction, make it a little shorter for the next meeting. But glad to be in San Diego, if only virtually.
Awesome. All right. So if anyone has any questions, we have about 10-15 minutes for questions. You can raise your hand. And I will try to call on you here. 1 second here. Okay, Shaheen, why don't you go first?
So I'm probably the worst guy to go first since I'm a tax attorney here in this meeting. And so most of the stuff you said, I already know.
Great. We'll sign you. We'd like to sign you up then to be one of our members.
Sure. But you know, what I want to ask you is how this gets played in the media, this issue of who's going to pay for what. Seems to me that quite often when it's wars, there's no issue. We just had a bill got passed after some objections from progressives to give more aid to a country in Europe, let's call it, starts with I and ends with Israel. So that's easy and it always happens, and the progressives have to come back and say, fine, we'll give it. But when it comes to these kind of things, we don't want to do that. How do you think that kind of plays in the media?
Well, yeah, you're right. I mean, your point is well taken. Somehow the people who don't want to pay for stuff somehow give the impression that, like, oh, American people don't want more taxes, even though the policies that we've been advocating for poll at above 70%, you know. Yeah, it's somehow the people who don't want to pay more taxes somehow generate more whatever and make people think that they kind of are everybody, when that's just not the case.
All right. Anyone else want to ask a question? Oh, I'm sure there are questions. You can also put them on the chat if you like. I can read them off. Oh, here, I see Emily has a question. Let me go ahead and read that. So Emily is asking, I am a big supporter of graduated flat tax for income, progressive brackets that exempt the first X amount of income, no deductions, no loopholes, no filing fees, business and individual. Does anyone have an opinion on this? Has it been discussed?
Well,